Well, good morning and welcome to Coffee with Ken. I'm Ken Biberaj, a managing director at Savills, a leading tenant advisory commercial real estate firm. We are in week 34 of social distancing as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and 11 weeks away from the next presidential inauguration. In the news today, we are continuing to count ballots across the country. Joe Biden has won Michigan and Wisconsin and is gaining ground in Georgia and Pennsylvania, while President Trump is hoping to close the gap in Arizona. Today's topic is leadership, past, present, and future, and we are so thrilled to be joined by the co-founder, co-executive chairman of the Carlyle Group, David Rubenstein. Good morning, sir. How are you?
My pleasure to be here. I'm doing well.
Excellent. Well, real quick, how have the last 34 weeks been for you personally?
Well, it's been a real change. For most of the last 30 years, I've spent on the road 200 plus days a year on the plane, running around the world, begging for money for Carlyle and other things. Now I'm sitting in my house and I go from the living room to the dining room to the kitchen to the library, and basically that's my house. It's kind of a house arrest situation that you're probably familiar with. So it's been different, but on the one hand, I don't know whether I'm happier or I'm sadder. I'm not running around the world and meeting people, but on the other hand, I can get more things done during a day. So it's a kind of bittersweet situation, a different lifestyle, but eventually I think I'll go back to the other lifestyle at some point.
Interesting. Well, when I was at the Kennedy School, they had a mantra. One of the main objectives going through that program was really to develop tri-sector competence, right? An understanding of the public sector, private, nonprofits, how they all weave together. I think you kind of epitomize this well-rounded approach that we've seen through your career. So maybe we'll take it through the buckets. Let's maybe start with the public sector and politics, where we're 2 days past the presidential election, no clear winner. Was 2020 a turning point in American politics? How do you assess this election and in this time we live in?
Well, first of all, it's clear that the polling community is not yet as adept as it would like to be, let's say. It missed the Trump vote in 2016 to some extent and missed it even more badly, I would say, this time. So that's a major factor in what happened, that people were just wrong about what they thought was going to happen. Secondly, it's clear that the markets are very happy with the outcome. The markets are really robust yesterday and today. Why are they happy? Well, you've got a president of the United States who is maybe more predictable than Donald Trump, but he doesn't have the ability to get the Democratic agenda probably implemented all that much, and certainly the left side of the party's agenda. So he's going to be relatively weakened because he doesn't have a gigantic mandate, and the Senate is controlled by the Republicans. So the market seems to like that, and we'll see whether that's a good idea or not. One point I would like to make, though, about the election is this. In the last 50 years or so, we've seen three presidents run for re-election, including my former boss, Jimmy Carter, and lose. Jimmy Carter, Gerald Ford, and George Herbert Walker Bush. And generally, they went back and they retreated to their hometowns, and they basically built up libraries, and they made some speeches and did other good things, but they weren't involved day-to-day in politics. I suspect that'll be different with Donald Trump. He's got roughly 60 million people that voted for him, and they love him. They'll walk through walls for him. So he's not going to go back to Palm Beach and say, well, I'm going to retire, I'll build a library, I'll play golf. I think he's going to be a major force in American politics for some time, and I do think he could consider running again. If he ran for president again in 4 years, he'd be the same age as Biden is, more or less now. Now, traditionally, that was considered an old age, but as we get older ourselves, we kind of think it doesn't look so bad. So Trump could do that, and as a result, I think his influence, his tweets, his positions on things are going to have a lot of influence in the Congress and in the next administration. So I don't think he's going away.
Fascinating. So how do you think, what kind of leadership skills or qualities are you going to be looking for, hypothetically, if Vice President Biden is the victor here? Well, what's it going to take to kind of get anything passed and done with the kind of split?
Okay, look, I'm a 71-year-old man, and 71-year-old people and 77-year-old people and 75-year-old people, they don't change that much. They're basically, what you see is what you get. So Joe Biden is an accommodationist. He gets along with people reasonably well. His strong suit has been he gets along with Democrats and Republicans. He's not a hard-edge ideologue. So I suspect he will try to cut as many deals as he can with his friend Mitch McConnell, who'll get some done and some he won't get done. I don't think you're going to see the AOC agenda being implemented anytime soon. I think Bernie Sanders' agenda and Elizabeth Warren's agenda, while they might have been popular in the primaries, are not likely to be seen anytime soon. So I think that's why the markets are reasonably happy. I think Biden's strength as a leader is I think people can trust him, and I think people will feel he's honest and hardworking. Donald Trump's skill as a leader is different. He would set out a vision and basically say, I'm going to walk through walls to get that vision. I don't care what people think. So that's the different style of leadership.
Where would you be today if President Carter had won a second term?
Well, I I've thought about that a lot. And had Carter won a second term, I hope to be a senior domestic advisor or something, a senior White House official. So I would have left the White House at the age of 34. And then because I was better known then, I probably would have gotten a better position in a Washington law firm. And I probably would have felt comfortable going in and out of government over the next 30 or 40 years. Because that didn't happen, I had to start my life all over again, and wasn't so good being a lawyer at the bottom. So I ultimately started Carlyle. So on the other one hand, I thought I wish Carter would have won at the time. On the other hand, it probably turned out for me career-wise better off that he didn't.
Interesting. So let's talk. So you jump into this business career. You've had obviously phenomenal success, and you've been ahead of the curve in pinpointing trends and where things are evolving. What do you think is coming down the pike? Where are we headed in terms of business and innovation and trends? I mean, obviously COVID has been an accelerant on so many things. I mean, where do you see innovation in the next kind of momentum heading in terms of the economy and growth?
Well, it's clear that technology is transforming our economy. When there was a buyout firm started about 20 some years ago that was called Silver Lake, and they were going to do technology buyouts, and people said there aren't enough deals in technology, and buyouts don't really work with technology because the technology changes too much. That turned out to be wrong. Today, every deal is a technology deal. Every deal has to have a company that's going to be digitally transformed or otherwise transformed. So technology is going to be one of the great areas in which to invest, particularly healthcare information technology, financial technology, food-related technology, a lot of things that people are now learning more about when they're sitting in their homes. So COVID has changed the way we're going to live for quite some time. Now think about this. The Industrial Revolution took roughly 100 years to change the way people lived and worked. The internet came along. It took about 20 years before people really adopted it and became a different way of living and so forth and conducting business. The smartphone took maybe 7 or 8 years before people really made it indispensable to themselves. The COVID situation and Zooming, or the equivalent of Zooming, is taken less than a year. And now very few people are going to give up their Zooming. For example, I used to fly to Abu Dhabi for a half-hour meeting and then fly back. That's insane today. Today, you wouldn't do that. Today, they wouldn't want me to come for half an hour, and I wouldn't want to go for half an hour. So people like me are not going to fly around the world quite as much. People, I think, are also going to work at home much more. It used to be the case you had to go to the office to show that you were working. Now, people can work at home, and they're much more comfortable doing so. So, as you know from your real estate experience, there's a big debate in the real estate world. Are people going to need more office space or less office space? More because the offices need to be more socially distanced. You won't have as many little cubby holes. You have to have bigger cubby holes and so forth and so on. Or will you have fewer people coming to the office and therefore you need less space? And you can debate that either way. But I suspect you're going to need less space. That's my observation in certain circumstances, particularly if people are like Microsoft. They say you don't have to come back to work ever. You can work remotely from home, which is what Microsoft and other technology companies are beginning to say. So the real estate world is going to be affected fairly dramatically.
Mm-hmm. So let's drill down in that a little bit. Do you think one of the trends that are going to come out of this is potential more flexibility, a desire to have more flex office, a rethinking? Because real estate really hasn't evolved much, right? It's been 10-year deals, 10-year leases, TI, you're there forever. Do you think it's going to be a situation where if they can weather the storm, firms like a WeWork and a Convene may be better suited to absorb some of the flex demands, the hub and spokes model, where maybe people don't need to come into the urban core. They could stay in Northern Virginia, go to an office. It doesn't need to be Carlisle, but it's a space where they can get out of their house and do some work. Do you see that kind of evolving, the just dramatic flexibility for occupiers of space?
Well, of course, the 10-year lease is fairly standard in the United States, but it is not standard around the world. As you probably know, it's shorter leases typically around the world. I suspect we will probably go to shorter leases because people won't want to make these long-term commitments. Secondly, it used to be that you had to show people you were in the office in order to show them that you were working. And people that didn't show up in the office were thought to be slaggards or they weren't working. Now people recognize that's not the case. And I think more and more people are going to say, why do I need to schlep into the office for an hour and I can just be in my Zoom office at home? So I think you'll see much more of that. Whether that'll make us more efficient or not, I don't know. It probably will make us more efficient. You won't waste as much time traveling. On the other hand, that will change people that are in business to help you travel. So I suspect you'll probably have less driving and less flying around and other things. So it's going to change the way we live. And usually it's tempting, and any time something significant happens in life, a historic event, you say this is going to change the world in a way that you can't predict, and sometimes it does, but rarely does it always make that change that you think it's going to make. This time, while it's difficult to say it will make a transformative change for certain over the next 10 or 20 years, I suspect it will change things a fair bit. people are just not going to travel as much to their office or work at their office as much. Think about this. Right now, you and I are using Zoom technology, and it's working reasonably well. But let's suppose it was 3D. Let's suppose it was virtual reality. You'd say, well, this is even better than being in the office. I don't need to do this. So we'll have those changes soon, and people will feel comfortable working at home much more than they even are today.
Yeah, I think a lot of organizations are able to see the productivity aspect of business kind of succeeding. People are meeting metrics. You're able to kind of reevaluate, and owners of businesses that we know who have been butts in seats kind of owners are quite pleasantly surprised. But when you've spent a lot of time interviewing folks and peers, how do you think about culture though? Like at a time like this, so many young people benefit from the connectivity of being in the office and building camaraderie, and then the mentorship. So you're at a certain point in your career where people will come to you and Zoom to you. If you're a younger person looking to make it, you rely a little bit on the culture and the community. How do you think? What's your advice to young people? What's your advice to CEOs who are trying to maintain a level of culture? Because so much of that was tied to the office space, right? Like part of our pitch was always, let's get the space that'll help you recruit and retain, right?
Well, younger people, when the pandemic is behind us and it's safer to go to the office, I think they will probably go to the office much more. They're going to, they probably either have small apartments or living at home with their parents. They certainly want to go into the office and make contacts, and they probably certainly will go into restaurants or bars or other kinds of things afterwards to kind of socialize. That will continue. Younger people are more likely to do that than older people. But I do think that even younger people are going to be comfortable with doing more work at home. In fact, it's the younger people that seem more comfortable working at home in many ways than the older people. They may socialize differently, but I do think younger people realize they don't need to go in the office in order to be seen as, quote, working.
Yeah. So you're spending a lot of your time now on Patriotic Philanthropy. Would love to learn more about that. So how do you approach philanthropy different than other folks, and what is Patriotic Philanthropy?
Okay. Well, philanthropy is derived from an ancient Greek word that means loving humanity. So we bastardized it to mean writing checks, but actually philanthropy means doing other things, volunteering, helping people. The most valuable thing you can do is give your time. You can't make more time. You can make more money if you're inclined to do so. So when I got lucky in my business career, I realized I had a fair amount of money and I could give each of my children $1 billion and spoil them, or say to them, look, I'll get you a good education, but you have to be more or less on your own, and then give away the money. And then I decided to try to do it while I was alive. And so most of my money goes to education, medical research, things like that. But I do give a fair bit to something I've called patriotic philanthropy, which is to say, to remind people of the history and heritage of our country. So fix the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Memorial, the Jefferson Memorial, or buy the Magna Carta and give it to the U.S. government in a way that people will be able to read more about these things and learn more about it. And the reason is this. There's a famous Harvard historian who said, those people that don't remember history are condemned to relive it. In other words, if you don't know about what happened in the past, you'll probably make the same mistakes again. Civilization will advance if we don't make the same mistakes, and society will be better if we don't make the same mistakes. But people don't learn about history so much in college or high school anymore. We don't know much about civics as much as we used to. So I'm trying to get people to visit historic sites, learn more about history, and maybe they'll be more informed citizens. The result is a better democracy. Democracy depends on informed citizenry. Right now, this is a sad situation, but you can graduate from almost any college in the United States without having to take a course in American history. You can almost graduate from any high school without having to take a course in civics. Think about this. If you want to be a citizen in this country and you came from another country, you have to live in this country for 5 years. Then you take a citizenship test. You study for 100 potential questions. They give you 10. You have to get 6 right, 6 out of 10. The questions are, who's the first president of the United States? How many branches of government are there? Well, it turns out that 91% of foreign citizens take that test passed. The same test was given to 27,000 Americans recently in all 50 states, and in 49 out of 50 states, a majority of citizens failed. They couldn't pass the basic citizenship test. In fact, 2/3 of Americans in a recent survey could not name the 3 branches of our government. So we need to have a better job, and part of what I'm doing in patriotic philanthropy is try to remind people about the history of our country and the good and the bad of it too.
So that seems like such a hands-on type of philanthropy where you're really in a position to do what you think makes sense. Do you have a favorite gift that you have done? I mean, was it being on top of the Washington Monument and putting the crown back up? Is it the Magna Carta? Is it the pandas? I mean, what really kind of made you just like euphoric? What was the best thing you did?
The thing that's most memorable is not all that, but it's that when I started building Carlyle, I'm the only child of my parents, and my mother didn't know much about business. She wasn't a college or educated or high school educated person, but she kind of knew I was in the business world. She didn't know exactly what private equity was. And she always was worried we were going to go bankrupt if the stock market went down by a little bit. So she wasn't that sophisticated about it. And she never actually called me to say, you're taking a company public, you made a lot of money, great. But when I started giving away large sums of money, she would call me repeatedly and say, thank you for what you're doing. You're actually doing something useful with your life. And when she passed away a few years ago, I went through her scrapbooks, and the only thing she had in her scrapbooks were the gifts that I'd given away, newspaper articles about them, nothing about the success of Carlyle, but everything about I'd done in philanthropy. So I guess that was my best gift. I made my mother proud.
So is philanthropy your true passion?
It is, because in the business world, there are plenty of people that are successful in business. I'm not the most successful by far. And in philanthropy, there are many people richer than me and more successful. But I've carved out some niches in philanthropy, like Patriotic Philanthropy, which I do enjoy. So yeah, and again, what's the purpose of being a human? Why are we on the face of the earth? Nobody really knows. But presumably, it's to help other people. And so when you're involved in philanthropy, you're helping other people. And the greatest pleasure in life is probably that. When Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, he said the pursuit of happiness is what Americans should do. But he never told us what happiness was all about. Happiness, as we all know, is probably the most elusive thing in life. It's very hard to get happiness. And for me, happiness comes when I'm giving away money or giving away my time and helping other people. That has produced more happiness than having a bigger bank account.
Interesting. So let's talk about leadership. You've studied it, interviewed folks who have studied leaders in the past and the present, and then talked about leadership in general. Do you think the most significant qualities of leadership are related to that individual or related to the moment in which they exist?
Well, there's no doubt that if we had no Civil War, Abraham Lincoln probably wouldn't be studied today. And if we hadn't gone into World War II, Franklin Delano Roosevelt probably wouldn't have become as famous. So there's no doubt rising to the occasion is important if you're going to be a great leader. But there are other qualities that can make you a significant leader. And in the book I recently wrote about that called How to Lead, it's a book about 31 interviews. There it is. 31 very famous people I've interviewed in all walks of life. And the key qualities are, aside from having luck to get started and luck along the way, are hard work, focus, ability to communicate with people, ability to have a vision of what you want to do, ability to share the credit with people, being ethical, and having some humility, I think helps as well. But in the end, I think leaders really want to do something to make their part of society much better. And that's what motivates a lot of them.
How much of it do you think, for the business leaders you've interviewed, is it really about their ability to market versus the product, right? Like I loved your Phil Knight interview, right? Like is Nike a product company or a marketing company? And you said it was a marketing company. I mean, how do you think about that, the marketing? And obviously it's not just in business, it's also in politics, right? Like if you look at product versus marketing, you can look at the presidential election, and for all intents and purposes, the president was really focused on the marketing versus the product.
You know, sometimes when you start a career, you start off as a salesman, door to door, selling magazines or selling something. In the end, when you realize that everybody's a salesman, the CEOs, everybody is a salesman. You're selling something. Mm-hmm. And so I think the ability to sell something, to communicate with people about why they should do what you think they should do, is a skill that all business leaders have. Because you're either selling an idea. If you're a military leader, you're selling the idea, let's go take that hill. If you're a business basketball coach, you're saying, we got to work together to beat that team. You're always selling something. And the great leaders are people that know how to motivate people and know how to get people to follow them. And to do that, you have to be a very good talker, very good writer, or just somebody who leads by example, who just does something that people will follow you. And that is a good way of communicating.
Who is someone that you have not interviewed, who's either alive or past, that you would like to have interviewed?
Well, of course, Abraham Lincoln, I think, is the greatest American. I would love to interview him, but that didn't happen. It's an interesting phenomenon. You're involved in interviews now. Think about it. The interview format that we're now conducting is a relatively new format in terms of public consumption. I think it probably started in a really significant way with the Tonight Show in the early 1950s, when Steve Allen was on, and later Jack Parr. They would bring celebrities out or other people, and they would interview them in a public way. But we didn't have that format for quite some time. So there are no interviews of Julius Caesar. There are no interviews of Aristotle. There are no interviews of William Shakespeare. There are no interviews of Henry VIII, because people didn't do that then. Now we do it. I wish I could go back and interview, let's say, William Shakespeare and say, who really wrote those plays? Tell us the truth. Or Henry VIII, say, Henry VIII, listen, why didn't you just have a prenup with your wives as opposed to having to chop off their heads? Or Cleopatra, who was a better lover, Julius Caesar or Mark Antony? These are the things that we don't know the answers to. We're never going to know. But I would like to, the people that are alive today, I think I'd love to interview the Pope. I mean, that would be interesting. I don't know that he's dying to be interviewed by me, but we'll see. Queen Elizabeth doesn't do any interviews, so that would be challenging. I've interviewed Donald Trump before he was president, and I hope to be able to interview him again at some point. And I think that'd be interesting. I haven't done an interview with Joe Biden, though I know him quite well. but I hope to interview him at some point. So, those are people that are interesting.
So do you plan on spending more time on the interview circuit, whether it's on television or through the Economic Club? I mean, and how do you prepare for your interviews and think about the topics you want to discuss, et cetera?
It takes a lot of time to prepare. I read if I'm interviewing an author, I will absolutely read the book. And if it's somebody that hasn't written anything, I will read all the articles I can get them, and I try to digest them. Then I prepare the questions in advance and kind of know what I want to do, and try to figure out the best way to make the interview work and bring out the qualities I want to bring out. It doesn't take that much of my time because, like anything, I've been now doing it for a while, so I know how to do it. Yeah. When I was starting it doing this, I took me a longer time. So now it doesn't take that much of my time, but I enjoy it, and it's it's also a way to keep my brain active. When you get to be a certain age, you always worry whether your brain is going to collapse on you at some point and you're slowing down. And so there are a number of ways to try to avoid that, but keeping your brain active by reading a lot and preparing and doing verbal jousting in an interview is probably a good way to stay reasonably mentally fit, though I recognize that obviously dementia and other things have biological things that you can't quite completely avoid.
So when you look at history and you look at our present democracy and government right now, what worries you about where we're headed, whether it's through this kind of the hardline elections that we're having and the kind of fringes of politics because of gerrymandering or whatever? What are you worried about? Or what's your assessment of the state of our democracy right now? What do we need to do to kind of get back on track?
Well, democracy is never a pleasant situation in that it works perfectly. Nobody ever said that democracy works perfectly. Churchill famously said it's the worst form of government except every other form of government. And we've had times during the Civil War when people on the floor of the Congress were fighting with each other. I mean, physically hurting each other. And we've gone through the terrible time of the Civil War. Now, we're slightly more civil than that, but clearly there's a division between the Democrats and Republicans that isn't likely to be bridged anytime soon. I think Joe Biden has a pretty good skill set to be able to do that, but I suspect we're going to be fairly divided for some time because the stakes are so great. And social media and the need to raise so much money has just divided the parties so much that I don't think, unless we have a national tragedy like 9/11 again, you're going to see everybody coming together anytime soon.
How are we going to get the economy back on track? If you have a conversation with Vice President Biden, if he ends up winning, what are your recommendations?
Well, then there are two things that have to be done. One, we have to get a stimulus bill through. The lame duck may pass a stimulus, but I suspect Biden would like to get his own fingerprints on it. So whatever passes in the lame duck, I think Biden will add to it in the next Congress. Secondly, we have to solve the pandemic, which is to say we have to get the vaccines out there and get people back to work, back to school, and living a more normal life. That's the best way to get the economy back. Nothing else, it really matters. So we've got to deal with that problem, and that's what his main focus is going to be, I think, early on.
So I spent 13 years in New York and then back home in Northern Virginia now, and I feel like the region is just having a bit of a moment. Not just because the Nationals won the World Series and the Caps won the Stanley Cup, but with Amazon coming and so much going on. What are your thoughts on the DC region itself and being an attractive place for innovation, for technology? I mean, you obviously have New York and San Francisco, but now in this post-COVID world, it seems like obviously real estate, residential is skyrocketing in Northern Virginia and elsewhere. What do you think of the region, and then what's your? Do you ever pitch it? Do you make the case to fellow CEOs and innovators about the area?
Well, it's a complicated situation. Washington is going to be the center of government as long as we're alive, and therefore it will always have a fair amount of money here. So Washington is overall probably about the wealthiest area in the country, area of its size. I mean, obviously there's some wealthier areas, but generally Washington is in pretty good shape because the government is going to be expanding, not contracting by and large. Everybody has Silicon Valley envy, and everybody wants to be the next Silicon Valley. And so some places will pull it off, some will not. Washington has a reasonably good chance of doing well in certain areas like biotech and other things, but it's still a way before we get to Silicon Valley. There aren't as many venture capital arms here as there are in Silicon Valley. But I do think that it's a good area in which to raise children, good area in which to live. I think the three jurisdictions actually work together reasonably well. And I do think it's an attractive area, but I'm hesitant to tell everybody to move here because it get too crowded. So I'm often tempted to say, don't move here. It's not so great because I don't want more people.
Fair enough. So look, you're incredibly busy with so many different projects, still doing Carlyle, still doing these interviews, still giving, but you also have a family office now. So how has that evolved, and when did you start that, and what are your plans now with the family office?
Well, when I was at Carlyle, the latter years, and I'm still the executive chairman, I'm the biggest shareholder of Carlyle, but as I was getting older, people would say to me, what about your family office? And I'd say, I don't have a family office. Eventually, I got family office envy. I got tired of not having a family office. All my friends had family offices. So I said, I'm going to have a family office. So I started one. And it's in Washington area, Boston, and New York. And we have a fair number of people now, maybe 20, 25 people, investing my capital principally in other things that Carlyle doesn't do. All the deals have to be cleared through Carlyle, more or less. And so it's not in conflict. But it's good. I have one of my daughters working there, so that's fun. And I have another daughter who's in the private equity world, and I help her with her fund. And so working with your children can be fun. So I enjoy it. And in the end, I'm doing it so I can make more money to give it away. I intend to give away basically all my money.
Are you running into a challenge where you're making too much money and not giving it away fast enough? I mean,
well, you can never make too much money for philanthropy purposes. There's always some great need. Every day I get lots of requests, and I can't do all the ones that come to me, but I'm interested in a lot of things that come to my attention. And but right now I'm pretty fully booked on things I want to do.
Yeah. Putting patriotic philanthropy on the side, just philanthropy in general, what role do you think it plays? Is it to test and to innovate, to meet immediate need? How do you think philanthropy should be thought of?
Well, philanthropy is a way to help other people. And in COVID situation, a lot of people like me changed a lot of their areas of focus and started doing things in the healthcare area or things in the food related area to help people that were in terrific need. But I think generally it's a way to instigate social change that government has more resources to be able to do, but government may move more slowly. So when philanthropists can make a decision quickly and implement that decision, it can make favorable social change, which eventually other people might follow, or eventually government might follow. But there isn't enough money in philanthropy to solve all the problems of the country. In the end, government's going to have to play a bigger role than philanthropy.
Great. Last question. I feel like right now we're dealing with an issue of trust in general, trust in science, trust in media, trust in government. What is your take on that? I mean, when you take a step back and look at where we exist today as Americans, I mean, and how do we rebuild trust in some of these institutions that we rely on and need every single day, especially because we're so divided? I mean, that was a very clear outcome of Tuesday.
When George Washington chopped down the cherry tree and his father asked him if he did so, he said, "I cannot tell a lie, I did it." Now, people tell that to children. Why? Because they want to bring home to children the idea that telling the truth is a good thing. And so the general rule of thumb when we're children, we're learned that telling the truth is a good thing. Nobody tells their children, lie as much as you can, that'll be a good thing for you. So truth is a very important thing. And I think we need to establish the concept that truth is the most important thing that you can convey to somebody else when you're communicating with them. And I think we have to reestablish that concept a bit. And I think that will help restore trust.
Well, David Rubenstein, it's been an absolute honor and a privilege. I appreciate you taking the time today, especially 2 days after the election. I want to thank everyone for tuning in today. Our next conversation for Coffee with Ken will be next week. We'll be joined by Aaron Mitchell of Netflix to talk about their efforts to invest in Black communities. Remember, practice social distancing, wash your hands, and wear a mask. Thanks so much, David. Real pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you. Bye.